Ethan Parker hadn't heard a knock on his door in months. Most people forgot his little cabin even existed, tucked away at the edge of Cedar Falls. But that night, the rain came in sideways, rattling the windows, and the wind howled like it wanted to rip the world apart. The knock was faint at first, hesitant, almost afraid, and for a moment, Ethan thought he'd imagined it. But then it came again, harder this time, urgent. When he opened the door, two young women stood shivering on his porch, their hair plastered to their faces, their clothes soaked through, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Ethan didn't know their names, their story, or why fate had brought them to his door in the middle of the worst storm he'd seen in years. All he knew was that they looked cold, lost, and desperately in need of a kindness he wasn't sure he had left to give. The wind nearly tore the door out of Ethan's hand as he stepped aside. "Get in here, quick," he urged, his voice louder than the storm. The women hurried inside, dripping water onto the wooden floor, their breaths sharp and uneven. Ethan shut the door hard, locking it against the roaring gusts outside. He turned to them, taking in the trembling shoulders, the wet sneakers, the flushed cheeks from cold. "Thank you," one of them managed between shivers. She had chestnut hair that stuck to her face, and her voice was gentle despite her shaking. "I'm Olivia. This is my sister, Chloe." Ethan nodded, moving to grab the only two clean towels he had. "Ethan," he replied, handing them over. "Let's get you both warmed up before you catch pneumonia." They wrapped themselves tightly, still standing close to each other. The fire in the corner was weak, barely glowing, but Ethan stoked it until flames reached up again, spilling heat into the cramped living room. Outside, the storm raged on, branches cracking somewhere in the distance. Inside, the only sounds were the fires popping and the girls' quiet breaths. "You live out here alone?" Chloe asked, her voice soft but curious. She had lighter hair than Olivia, with the same green eyes, though hers seemed sharper, more watchful. "Yeah," Ethan said, settling into the old armchair. "Been here a while." He didn't offer more. He'd learned that most strangers didn't really want the whole story. But Olivia wasn't like most strangers. "It's really kind of you to let us in," she said. "We were driving through, heading back to the city, but the roads, they're impossible. Our car broke down, and there's no cell signal." "That storm eats cell service alive out here," Ethan said. "You'll have to wait it out till morning. I've got the couch and a spare blanket. It's not much, but it's warm." Olivia smiled faintly, but Chloe studied him, like she was trying to figure out why a man living in such a worn-down place would still open his door for two strangers. The truth was, Ethan didn't really know either. Life hadn't been gentle with him. His marriage had ended 5 years ago after his architecture firm collapsed under debt. His ex-wife had taken Liam and Grace to Chicago, and though he called and visited when he could, it was never enough. Every month felt like a fight, to pay bills, to keep the lights on, to keep himself from drowning in the quiet. He'd learned to live small, to make peace with loneliness. But something in the sisters' faces, the vulnerability, the way they leaned on each other, pulled at him in a way he hadn't felt in years. "You must be freezing," Ethan said, standing. "I'll make some coffee. There's soup too, if you're hungry." Olivia's eyes softened with gratitude. "That would be amazing." As he moved into the kitchen, Ethan heard them speaking quietly, though the storm drowned out most of their words. Something about Dad and worried reached his ears, but he didn't press. People came with their own burdens, and he'd long since stopped prying. By the time he set the steaming mugs in front of them, their color had returned a little. They cupped the drinks in both hands, holding on like it was the first warmth they'd felt in hours. "Ethan," Chloe said after a moment, "you didn't even ask who we are or why we're here. Most people wouldn't open their door to strangers in the middle of the night." Ethan leaned back, staring at the fire. "Storm like this, you don't leave people outside. Doesn't matter who they are." Neither sister replied right away, but they exchanged a glance, one Ethan couldn't quite read. The wind howled again, shaking the windows, but the fire was steady now, and the room smelled faintly of coffee and wood smoke. For the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel the crushing weight of solitude pressing in on him. Instead, there was a strange sense of purpose, as though letting them in had opened something in him that had been locked away for too long. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was angrier now. Thunder rattled the walls, and the old roof groaned with every gust of wind. Ethan poured himself a coffee and sat across from the sisters, his eyes flicking between them. Olivia stared at the fire, her hands tight around her mug, while Chloe seemed restless, her gaze darting to the window every few seconds as though she expected someone, or something, to appear out of the darkness. You said you were trying to get to your father, Ethan said finally, his voice low. That's a long drive in this kind of weather. Why not wait it out wherever you were? Olivia's lips pressed together, and for a moment, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Then, she spoke quietly. We didn't have a choice. He needs us. Chloe's head snapped toward her sister, eyes narrowing slightly, but she didn't interrupt. Ethan didn't push. He knew what it was like to have parts of your story you weren't ready to share. You'll be safe here for the night, he said instead. Morning comes, I'll drive you to town. See if we can get that car of yours running again. Olivia gave a faint nod, but Chloe didn't look convinced. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the pop and hiss of the fire. Ethan's mind drifted. The sister's unease reminded him of a winter years ago, when he'd been stuck in a cheap motel after the business fell apart. His phone had rung. It was his ex-wife, telling him she was moving to Chicago with the kids. He'd stared at the peeling wallpaper, feeling like his life was being boxed up and shipped away without him. He looked at Olivia and Chloe now and saw the same quiet desperation in their faces, the kind that comes when you're trying to outrun something you can't quite escape. A sudden crash outside made all three of them jump. Ethan rose, peering out the window. A large branch had fallen against the side of the cabin, scraping the wood. Just the storm, he assured them. But Chloe was already on her feet, pacing. Everything okay? He asked. She hesitated. Yeah, just can't sit still. Ethan decided to lighten the mood. Well, if you're restless, you can help me in the kitchen. Soup's almost ready. To his surprise, Chloe followed him. They worked in awkward silence, ladling steaming broth into mismatched bowls. When they returned, Olivia was staring at a framed photo on the mantel. One of Ethan, younger and smiling, with two kids who looked like they couldn't have been older than 8. Your kids? She asked. Yeah, Ethan said, his voice softening. Liam and Grace. They live with their mom now. They're beautiful, Olivia said, setting the frame back gently. You must miss them. Every day, Ethan replied. He didn't add that it felt like missing a piece of himself that would never grow back. The conversation dipped into a more comfortable quiet after that. They ate, and for a brief moment, the storm felt distant, as though the warmth of shared food could hold it at bay. But just as Ethan was starting to believe the night might end peacefully, a shadow moved across the window. It was quick, so quick that he almost doubted he'd seen it, but the way Chloe's eyes widened told him she had too. Probably just a tree swaying, Ethan said, though he wasn't convinced. Olivia's voice was steady, but her hands tightened around her bowl. We should lock the windows. Ethan frowned. Anything you want to tell me? Neither sister answered right away. The storm roared louder, and in the flicker of the firelight, Ethan realized this night was far from ordinary. Something had driven these two to his door, and whatever it was, it might still be out there. The night dragged on, the storm's fury refusing to relent. Every few minutes, lightning split the sky, turning the cabin into a brief black and white photograph of tense faces and flickering shadows. Ethan tried to read the sisters' expressions, but they guarded themselves well, too well for women their age. Whoever's out there, he finally said, breaking the silence. If someone is out there, they're not getting in. Doors are locked. Windows too. Olivia forced a small smile, but Chloe didn't respond. Instead, she kept glancing toward the front door, her jaw tight, her fingers tapping against her knee. Ethan's instinct told him there was more to this than a broken-down car and bad weather. You two want to tell me why you were driving through Cedar Falls at night, in a storm like this? Olivia's gaze met his for a second, then dropped. We told you, we need to see our dad. That's not all of it, Ethan pressed gently. Chloe sighed, almost angrily. You don't know our family. If you did, you wouldn't be asking. Ethan leaned back. Try me. For a long moment, neither sister spoke. Then Olivia's voice softened. Our daddy's sick. The kind of sick where every day matters. We were visiting friends, and he called, asking us to come home. But the weather got worse, and the car. It's not just that, Chloe interrupted sharply, earning a warning look from her sister. Ethan noticed. Go on. Chloe shook her head, lips pressed tight. It doesn't matter. You've already done enough by letting us stay here. Her tone was final, but it only made Ethan more certain there was something urgent they weren't saying. Still, he knew better than to push too hard. People revealed the truth when they were ready. The fire burned low, casting deep shadows against the walls. Ethan stood, tossing another log onto the flames. Sparks rose, catching Olivia's attention. You were an architect, she said suddenly, surprising him. Ethan turned. How did you? The drawings on your wall, she explained. You've got plans for houses, buildings, they're beautiful. Ethan's eyes followed hers to the framed sketches he'd left hanging. They were relics of a life before debt and divorce. That was a long time ago. But you're good, Olivia insisted. You still could be. Her words stirred something in him he'd buried. Doesn't pay the bills anymore, he said quietly. They spoke little after that, each lost in their own thoughts. The wind outside began to sound almost like voices, low, distant, and haunting. Then, a sudden thud hit the porch, making all three of them jump. Ethan grabbed the flashlight from the counter and moved toward the door. Stay here, he ordered, his voice firm. He stepped outside into the driving rain. The beam of the flashlight swept across the porch and landed on a suitcase, soaked, scuffed, and oddly out of place. When he brought it in, Chloe's face went pale. Olivia's lips parted in shock. That's ours, Chloe whispered. But it was in the car. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Then how did it get here? Neither sister had an answer, but the fear in their eyes told him they might already know. The suitcase sat between them like a silent accusation. Water dripped from its corners, forming a small puddle on the cabin floor. The sound was steady, rhythmic, and somehow louder than the storm beyond the walls. Ethan crouched, brushing his fingers against the worn handle. If this was in your car, how in the hell did it end up here? Olivia swallowed hard. Someone must have brought it. That means, Ethan said slowly, someone followed you. Chloe's hands balled into fists. We didn't want to involve you in this. Ethan stared at her. Involve me in what? Her eyes darted to Olivia, who gave the slightest shake of her head. But Chloe was past holding back. We weren't just visiting friends. We were trying to get away from someone our father trusted. Someone who isn't what he seems. Olivia's voice was quick, almost pleading. Chloe. No, Chloe said firmly. He deserves to know. She turned back to Ethan. This man worked with our dad for years. When our father got sick, he started controlling everything, his business, his home, even who could see him. Dad's been trying to fight him off, but we found something. Papers. Contracts. If they get destroyed, Dad loses everything. And that's what's in the suitcase? Ethan asked. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Yes. We were taking it back to him when the storm hit. The pieces were falling into place, but they didn't make him feel any better. If someone had tracked them here, that meant trouble could be minutes away. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. All right. You're safe here for now, but we need to be smart. In the morning, we'll get you to town and call someone you trust. There's no one, Chloe said bitterly. Not besides Dad. Ethan didn't like the sound of that. He'd spent enough years in business to know what greed and desperation could drive people to do. And here, in the middle of nowhere, in the teeth of a storm, they were cut off from the world. The fire popped loudly, making Olivia flinch. Ethan looked between them. You should get some rest. I'll stay up and keep watch. You don't have to, Olivia began. Yes, I do, Ethan said firmly. Reluctantly, the sisters settled on the couch, wrapped in blankets. They whispered to each other in voices too low for Ethan to catch. He sat by the fire, one ear tuned to the wind, the other to the creaks of the cabin. Hours crawled by. The storm outside was relentless, but every so often, he thought he heard something different, footsteps, maybe muffled by rain. Then just after midnight, the power went out. The cabin plunged into darkness, save for the dying fire. Olivia sat up sharply, eyes wide, and Chloe reached instinctively for the suitcase. Ethan's voice was calm, but inside, his pulse quickened. Stay close to me. Another sound came from the porch, a deliberate, heavy knock. The knock was slow and deliberate, 3 heavy thuds that seemed to vibrate through the cabin's walls. The storm outside screamed against the roof, but in the moments between wind gusts, the sound of someone breathing just beyond the door reached Ethan's ears. Olivia's grip on the suitcase tightened until her knuckles went white. Chloe rose halfway from the couch, every muscle coiled like a spring. Stay back, Ethan said, his voice low but firm. He stepped toward the door, listening again. Whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry to leave. The fire crackled weakly, casting flickering shadows across the room. Ethan's hand hovered over the door handle, but he didn't open it. Who's there? He called. Silence. A flash of lightning lit the window, and for the briefest second, a figure stood on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, head bent forward. Then darkness swallowed him again. Olivia's voice trembled. It's him. I know it is. Ethan turned. The man you were running from? She nodded. Chloe's jaw tightened. If you open that door, we're done. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. Ethan's mind raced. He could tell whoever it was had no intention of asking politely forever. Go to the back room, Ethan told them. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Chloe hesitated. Ethan. Now. They obeyed, disappearing down the narrow hall, the suitcase still clutched in Olivia's arms. Ethan grabbed the heavy flashlight and the old hunting rifle his father had left him. It wasn't loaded, he hadn't hunted in years, but it might be enough to make a stranger think twice. Another flash of lightning revealed the figure still there, unmoving. Ethan cracked the door open, just enough to speak over the roar of rain. You need to leave. Now. The man didn't answer right away. Then, in a deep voice, he said, They have something that doesn't belong to them. Ethan's grip on the door tightened. Whatever it is, you're not getting it tonight. A long pause. Then the man stepped closer, and Ethan caught the gleam of water dripping from his coat. You don't understand who you're protecting. Doesn't matter, Ethan said. They're under my roof, and that's enough. The man tilted his head, studying him, then turned and walked off the porch, vanishing into the rain. Ethan stood frozen, unsure whether he'd actually left or was circling the cabin. When the sisters emerged again, Olivia's eyes were wide. Is he gone? For now, Ethan said, though he didn't believe it. He stoked the fire again, his mind already working through what would happen when the storm cleared, and the real danger began. The first light of dawn seeped into the cabin, weak and cold. The storm had finally begun to ease, but the air inside was thick with unease. Ethan hadn't slept. Every creak of the wood, every rustle of wind through the trees, had kept him alert. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, the suitcase in front of her like a shield. Her hair was damp from the night before, her eyes shadowed from exhaustion. Chloe stood by the window, peering out at the clearing, scanning the tree line as if expecting the figure to materialize at any moment. He's still out there, she said quietly. Ethan poured black coffee into a chipped mug. Maybe. Or maybe he left when he realized he wasn't getting in. Chloe shook her head. That man doesn't give up. Not when he wants something. Ethan leaned against the counter, studying them both. Then we need a plan. Olivia glanced up. We were supposed to meet someone in Milford. A lawyer. He could get these documents to our father without being intercepted. But we didn't make it before the storm hit. Milford's 40 miles from here, Ethan said. With the roads washed out, we're not getting there in a straight shot. But I know the old service road through Pine Hollow. It's rough, but it's faster. Chloe frowned. And if he's waiting for us? Ethan's gaze hardened. Then we'll make sure he's the one surprised. They ate a quiet breakfast, each lost in thought. By the time they'd packed what they needed, the sun was struggling through the clouds, and the air smelled of wet earth. As they stepped outside, the forest was still dripping from the night's downpour. Ethan loaded their bags into his old pickup, the engine groaning to life. The girls climbed in, Olivia clutching the suitcase on her lap. Half a mile down the road, they reached the turnoff for Pine Hollow. The dirt track was littered with branches, the kind of road that could easily trap them if they weren't careful. But it was their best chance. They drove in silence for nearly 20 minutes before Chloe stiffened. Ethan. He saw it too. A black SUV sat on the side of the trail ahead, angled just enough to block part of the road. No one was visible inside. Ethan slowed the truck. Stay calm. Don't open your door. As they approached, the driver's side door of the SUV opened, and a man stepped out, the same tall, broad-shouldered figure from the porch. He stood in the middle of the track, raincoat gone, revealing a dark suit, his expression unreadable. Ethan stopped the truck 10 yards away. The forest around them was silent, except for the ticking of the engine. The man raised his hand, palm out, a signal to stop. You're making a mistake, Mr. Hayes, he called. Olivia's voice shook. Keep going. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. He'd promised himself he wouldn't drag these girls into a fight, but now, it seemed the fight had found them. The tension in the truck was thick enough to choke on. Ethan kept his hands on the steering wheel, the engine idling low, exhaust curling into the damp air. The man in the suit took a few slow steps toward them, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the mud. You don't know what you're carrying, he said, voice low but carrying easily through the morning stillness. Ethan leaned out the driver's side window just far enough to speak. Doesn't matter. You're not taking it from them. The man's lips curved, not into a smile but something colder. This isn't about them. It's about what's inside that case. His eyes flicked to Olivia's lap, where the suitcase sat like a lifeline. Olivia's grip on it tightened. You're not getting it. Olivia, the man said, his tone shifting to something almost gentle. Your father's enemies will do worse than stand in the road. I'm here to stop that. I'm here to keep you alive. Chloe leaned forward. You think threatening us is keeping us alive? He didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on Ethan. One last time. Hand it over, and you can drive away without looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Ethan thought about the long night, the pounding rain, the moment on the porch when this man had been nothing but a shadow. And he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Handing it over wouldn't make them safe. He shifted the truck into gear. Hold on, he told the sisters. The man's expression didn't change, but his stance did. He braced himself as if expecting Ethan to charge forward. The pickup rolled ahead, slow at first, tires sucking against the wet earth. Ethan's eyes stayed locked on the man's face, searching for the flicker of uncertainty that might give them an opening. But then, without warning, 2 more men stepped out from the trees, both dressed in dark coats, each holding something metallic in their hands. Ethan, Chloe's voice was sharp. He slammed the truck into reverse, backing down the muddy track as fast as the road would allow. Branches scraped the sides of the truck. One of the men shouted something, but Ethan didn't hear the words. His focus was on the rearview mirror and the narrow, twisting road behind them. They didn't stop until they were far enough down the trail that the SUV was out of sight. Ethan pulled to the side and killed the engine, breathing hard. We can't go forward, Chloe said. Ethan nodded grimly. Then we find another way. The air inside the truck felt heavy, every breath shallow. Ethan gripped the wheel, scanning the woods for movement. The silence now was worse than the storm had been. Storm noise you could predict, but this quiet was alive, watchful. We can't go back to the main road, Chloe said, her voice quick and clipped. If they split up, they'll have it covered. Ethan nodded. Pine Hollow feeds into an old logging route. It's barely a trail now, but it runs all the way to Milford's north edge. If we can make it there. Olivia finally spoke, her voice shaking but steady. They won't stop, Ethan. Not until this is in their hands or we're dead. Ethan looked at her through the rearview mirror. Then we make sure neither happens. The truck jolted forward as he steered them off the main track, tires crunching over wet brush. The forest thickened, branches clawing at the windshield. Mud sprayed from the tires, and the suspension groaned over hidden roots. For nearly an hour they pushed through, following the ghost of a trail Ethan remembered from years past. Every so often he'd kill the engine, listening for any sound of pursuit. All he heard was the drip of water from the trees and the distant call of a raven. By midday the clouds began to thin, letting pale sunlight break through in trembling patches. Ethan risked stopping at a clearing to stretch their legs and check the fuel. They were down to less than a quarter tank. While Chloe stepped away to watch the perimeter, Olivia approached Ethan quietly. You never asked what's in the suitcase. Ethan shrugged. Didn't need to. Figured if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me. Her eyes glistened. It's proof. Proof that the man who's been working with my father's competitors has been feeding them designs, contracts, entire projects. If they get this, they can ruin him. And not just him. Everyone who works for him. Ethan frowned. So you're telling me this is bigger than your family? She nodded. A lot bigger. Before he could respond, Chloe's voice rang out, low, urgent. We've got company. Ethan turned to see a dark vehicle moving slowly through the trees on the far side of the clearing, its black paint flashing between the trunks. They scrambled back into the truck. Ethan floored the accelerator, the tires spitting mud as they tore down the trail. The vehicle followed, weaving through the same narrow path. The forest roared past in a blur. Every bend in the trail felt like it might be the last before they were forced to stop. Then, through the trees, Ethan spotted the faint glint of metal, the old Milford Bridge. Beyond it lay the safety of town, or so he hoped.